This is The Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media. Now, here's Jason Jones.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to The Jason Jones Show. I am your host, Jason Jones, broadcasting from the west side of Oahu, and I have a show for you today. My guest is the one, the only Obianuju Ekeocha, and I know I butchered that name. She's a dear friend. We call her Uju. I was flipping through Instagram this week, and I saw my dear friend Uju trending on social media in a passionate response she made to Nancy Pelosi and the other Democrats using a traditional African garb and their virtue signal Olympics expedition they did there in Washington, D.C. This is a far-ranging conversation. We talk about George Floyd, racism, how the different experiences that Africans have in the West, in the United States that move here, and how that differs from the experience of African Americans. We talk about the racism of abortion. Uju gives us the cure for postpartum depression. No, I'm not kidding you. The cure for postpartum depression is in the show. She is an incredible woman. She's one of my heroes. This is a very special episode of the Jason Jones Show. So let's get on with it. Obianuju Ekeocha on the Jason Jones Show. Aloha, Uju. Welcome to the Jason Jones Show.
Thank you, Jason, for having me on your show. I'm very pleased to be here.
Okay, now you have to help me pronounce your name. I'm going to try it, and then you're going to laugh at me and then tell me how to say it right, okay?
Okay.
Okay, here. Guys, I'm interviewing Obianuju Ekeocha.
That's great.
You didn't laugh at me. No,
That's great, right? Really, I'm laughing. I'm not laughing at you. I'm just laughing at the fact that you got it. You did it. You didn't know you were going to get it, but you got it. It's amazing.
Okay.
Well done.
Well, we all call you Uju, and you're my dear friend.
Yes.
And I saw you, not only this week were you trending on social media with your response to the Democrat Party of America's sequel to Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever, starring Nancy Pelosi. Your book is number 5 on Amazon.
Yes.
That's...
I think the two are connected somehow. It's just there are two things that have happened this week that I never meant for any of it to happen, but they did happen anyway.
Well, now that you're on my show, your book will make it to number 7 on Amazon.
No, I'm hoping it makes it to at least number 1.
No, I'm kidding. I'm implying you'll fall a few spaces because you're on my show. So,
no, Jason, no.
So isn't that what happens? You don't mean to do, we work really hard at getting our messages out. And then when it's sort of off the cuff, you speak from the heart with no affectation or thoughtfulness or mindfulness to the consequences. And that's what really resonates with people. And you are...
Jason.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
You know, you have no idea. This was, I think it was either Monday or Tuesday. I was getting ready to go on a night shift. As you know, dear friend Jason, I work at a hospital and I do mostly night shift hours. So this was half an hour before I left for work, but then I saw this thing online. It just drove me to the wall. I had to do something. I had to. If I didn't do something at that time, I knew by the time I would go to work, I'll probably just cool down, after having dealt with patient samples for 12 hours. But I just had to do something.
Okay, and so what we're talking about is the Democrat Party in a public, pious act of virtue signaling. They wore virtue signaling. They wore something that is traditional to a tribe in Africa. It doesn't represent all Africans, and they did it in some sort of pious display to get votes. And and you did a great job in your video of saying that how you experienced this as an African from Africa who lives in the UK. You understand is much different than how an American who's Black would experience this. But can you tell us through your eyes when you saw this, how did it make you feel? And is that sort of how most Africans feel? How do what's the sort of consensus to this kind of virtue signaling in Africa? And how did you feel? How did it make you feel?
Right. Okay. So first of all, as you know, Africa is an entire continent, and a lot of Africans are quite conscious of this. You know, a Nigerian may just not know much about Kenya, or at least they know that Kenya is a completely different society with their tribes and ethnic groups and cultures and customs. But the one thing we do know as Africans is that whichever African country you go to, especially in the sub-Saharan African region, that's sort of the Black Africa, right? If I can put it that way. The north is where you have the Arabs and the Muslims, but then the sub-Saharan African region, everybody in every African country in that region is very conscious of the fact that we all hold our traditions very dear to heart. It might be different, but it's really dear to heart. And it usually would be something that is linked to our fathers and our forefathers before us. So on this very day in question, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi, I should say, with the other people from the American Congress, at least the Democrat Party, I noticed or saw them, they were all kneeling down. Well, again, I did mention in the video, I wasn't going to comment about it. I had tried my best not to say my own thoughts. Of course, I do have my thoughts about it, but I wasn't going to say that what my thoughts were. I just kind of defer to the Black Americans or to the African Americans, right? So, but then what caught my attention was the fact that each and every one of them had around their necks this very colorful, bright fabric, and looking closely, of course, I knew what it was. That was the Kente material. The Kente belongs in Ghana, and I'm not even Ghanaian, but even I know that. You know how I told you that African people are very conscious of, you know, if you are doing something, you turn around and say, well, it belongs to the Ghanaians, right? And I'm Nigerian. And the same thing happens when the Ghanaians would see or use or, you know, come across some kind of Nigerian fabric. We have our Ashoke and we have our Akwete, and, you know, there's all these things that are linked to different tribes and regions. So the Kente, I immediately recognized it, and it's very popular, I think, in the U.S. because I noticed that a lot of African Americans wear it maybe during graduation and things. So, but you don't go causing trouble with anybody. But the fact that these Democrats, who are mostly white, by the way, had this Kente around them, and I just point out right here, I'm not the kind of person that would say, you know, a white person shouldn't wear an African wear. I don't even, you know, that's not me at all. I have friends who are English, and I always try to encourage them to wear some Nigerian thing or the other, right? So just so that I'll rejoice over it. But on that day, these people, these politicians were sending a signal. They were sending a message saying that, you know, because of this man who unfortunately died, I think it's George Floyd, you know, this is like will I say almost like a signal or a symbol that we are with Black people and we are together with you and, you know, hashtag whatever, right? But then there were some things that struck me immediately as an African. So in other words, what the Democrats were doing was presenting this Kente, or presenting themselves all fully wrapped up in the Kente fabric, as if the Kente fabric is some kind of uniform for Black people. It's like, let's just pick any nice looking fabric from, you know, from Africa. And of course, the Kente is one of the most beautiful African fabrics that really would attract or catch the eye. So they went and picked it. But then they're talking about this Black American man, and they're wrapping themselves up in the Ashanti tribe fabric. And again, there was something else which was a huge faux pas that the Democrats don't even realize. So that thing that they did, that show, that the whole kneeling down thing and keeping a moment of silence, and, you know, the press was like reporting on it like it was one huge thing. They're actually giving some kind of sort of respect for the dead, right? So this is some kind of sort of a memorial for a man who has died. Now, do you know in most African tribes, you cannot wear colors to remember the dead. You can't wear yellow and red, green, Kente to remember the dead. That's a no-no in our culture. You don't do that, right? But these people, we were trying to show how, how woke they are with, we can go all African on you. They go and do something which is in fact directly against the culture in order to present themselves or to send a signal or probably to give a strike to the other side who they're always accusing of racism. But what they did on that day, I never saw something more racist than that and more disrespectful than that. And that's why I did exactly why I did what I did and why I said what I said in my video.
Well, I really appreciate you for your courage and the force of your video. Even Van Jones said he fears more the liberal Democrat Clinton supporter. He said this on CNN than he would somebody in the Aryan Nation because they effectively know how to weaponize race. What I didn't like about it as an American is they were othering George Floyd, to use their word that they love to use. They were saying George Floyd's not American. I'm English, Welsh, and Scottish. My most recent immigrant in my bloodline to this country was in the early 20th century. I promise you George Floyd has ancestors in this country that have been here much longer than me. Imagine if I died and in some sort of ritual they wrapped themselves with the Union Jack. How bizarre would that be? Well, wait, what? I'm an American. Wait, what? And so when I saw it, I'm like, what is this? And then,
it's so awkward.
Why do you think they were doing this? What was their goal? What do you think?
It was very clear. They were trying to show that they are standing firmly with the Black people. We are you. When something happens and then people go online and have a hashtag, I am this person, right? So it's like hashtag, I am George Floyd, hashtag, I am Black American, hashtag, I am whatever. I think that's like what they were trying to embody with their message. They actually took it one step further, that we are so you that we are going to dress up like you. Or, go traditional. So it's almost like Nancy Pelosi coming out in all Afro or, some African hairdo, right? But that could have even been more forgivable, because no African tribe can patent any hairstyle. Unlike the Kente material, unlike the Kente fabric, that you don't wear the colorful Kente to remember the dead. You don't wear it, and do some kind of service to the dead. You can't do that. The Ghanaians will wear red and black. There's another kind of Kente fabric but they don't know all of that because they didn't ask that. They go all the way,
Uju, not only do they not know it, all of those members of Congress, either one of two things, did not have one staffer that knew that, or if they did, they ignored them.
No, they wouldn't have.
It was either...
They wouldn't have, because, you do have to be African to understand some of the cultures. Even some of the young, second-generation Africans who are in these Western countries don't know much of our culture because, we get to lose our culture every generation. But then these cultures are still being practiced very strongly. If only they would go, but I don't even think they knew. I was born and raised in Africa, and I know what it means, what our outfit means. Sometimes I wear something, a dress or, some kind of outfit, and my mom sees me. My mother, who is 77 years old, she calls me back and she says, go and take off that thing and wear something else. You ask her why, she say, look, there are colors there that are for the dead. She would immediately point to something. Or she would say, you can't use this fabric to make anything because you know what? My husband is still alive. She would tell me, she would say, if you give me this fabric, everybody would say I'm trying to be a widow. So Africans immediately, and this thing is so encoded, it's so natural. You would think my mom is not even looking, but she looks at you and she says, oh my goodness, you're going to a wedding. You can't wear something that has that design. So it's so within our DNA that it means a lot. It means a lot. And so for Nancy Pelosi and her group to just immediately stretch their hands all the way to Ghana and sort of steal this fabric, in a sense of speaking, for this particular purpose, It's unconscionable. It is unconscionable. And you asked initially if I was the only person that felt that way. A lot of Africans in the last couple of days, I have spoken to so many people and communicated with so many people, even people from Ghana, and they are really of the same, they really have the same sentiments as myself. They were just as outraged. There's just some things that you don't do. There's some things you don't do. So it's different than Nancy Pelosi going to Ghana and maybe they're having some ceremony at the president's house and the president may give them a gift. I know that could have happened, that may have happened, but she has no right to do what she did, because what she then did was to go get a lot of this Kente fabric and then they're sort of trying to mask all black people in it, or trying to show it as like some sort of uniform for black people. And that is, an insult to the degree that I couldn't even begin to tell you as an African person.
Well, I want to get back to something you said, because earlier about they wanted to show solidarity with Black Americans. But I think they showed the exact opposite. There's a French anthropologist, René Girard, who talks about something called victimism, or feigning concern for the vulnerable for power or for wealth. Mm-hmm. And in the United States right now, we're seeing it's like the victimist Olympics. Every corporation in the world is emailing me that Black Lives Matter. Every politician in the world is taking a knee and saying that Black Lives Matter. They are feigning concern for the vulnerable. And there is systematic racism in the world and in America. I want to get to that in a second with you. But to really be in solidarity with the vulnerable isn't to have NBC, ABC, CBS, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and, a major political party all singing in chorus. To be in solidarity with the vulnerable is to be alone next to a vulnerable person getting hit in the head with rocks, just like they are, suffering with them. Real solidarity, and that's something you have been doing with the women and the families of Africa for a long time. And Facebook, Google, Twitter, major Chevron, major corporations aren't helping you. And that is the real systematic racism, the neoliberal, neo-colonialism of the culture of death. And you have been courageous about that. A friend of mine in America just today, who's been sending me a black friend, has been sending me all these messages about racism in America. And I sent him a link to Stoddard's book, The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy, in his Wikipedia biography that showed he was a founder of Planned Parenthood. There's the system and systematic racism. But if you were to speak up against that in the United States, you would be hammered. And you have been hammered speaking up against the neocolonialism of abortion and the culture of death in Africa. Can you talk to, your book is now number 5. This, I think, is a real opportunity, which you've taken, to share with people about what's really happening in Africa. Can you talk to that a bit?
Sure. Now, for the last 7 years, I would say I have been thrown into the vortex of this fight, which I didn't even know existed. As I had mentioned earlier, I was born and raised in Nigeria, came to the UK, started working as a scientist, so just very much proud of my Nigerian identity and my Nigerian background. But all the same, that was it. I just had such an innocent mindset about the world. The world is either black or white. I loved the United Nations. I loved the World Health Organization. These were all the things that I was given from home, right? These are all the things that I was taught from home. And then I came to the UK, started working. One day in 2012, I came across an interview that I felt looked interesting, and that changed my life, Jason. That was an interview by Melinda Gates, the wife of Bill Gates. She's on CNN with Christina Amanpour, and she's having this interview telling Christina Amanpour about her project in Africa, and I decided to listen closely. It so happened to be that this lady, this philanthropist, everybody knows, very wealthy, they're almost one of the wealthiest couples in the world. Their foundation is so well respected, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And what's she talking about? She's talking about how to raise money, some billions of dollars, to get contraceptives into the 69 poorest countries in the world. Now that shocked me. That listening to that interview, I think it changed my life. It was an interview that was only about 15 minutes long, but it changed my life and it opened my eyes forever. That
So
I came to
Uju,
yes.
I want to stop you there because right now the average American white liberal or white conservative, maybe Western white liberal or white conservative, would think, well, that makes perfect sense. What a wonderful thing. What would you say to them?
It is not the business. I would say it is not the business of somebody who is sitting in the West to think of controlling or directing the reproductive life or the reproductive capacities of anybody who is living in a poorer country. I think it makes better sense that way. So even though some people would say, well, we're just giving them the choice to make sure that women can, get their contraceptives. This was exactly Melinda Gates. These were her words, and this was her thinking. But then if you stand back a little bit and look at it, what one is seeing is that these people are bringing billions of dollars into African nations, and they are swaying policy. They are changing policy for us. They are forcing our government, because the African government will always go towards the money, no matter what the culture says. So you come to a place where the birth of children is celebrated, every pregnancy is celebrated, people are dancing when a baby is born, and then you throw in, $10 million or $10 billion and, for contraception, for contraceptive, for IUD, and you say it's only voluntary. What then happens is that the government starts to rally around to change the way the people think, and that is exactly what followed after Melinda Gates' $1 billion project on contraception. She came in, she changed the attitude, and it's still ongoing. The government is doing a lot more to push people or to force people or to discourage people from having children. Why? Because they're trying to meet up with the targets that would line up with the Gates agenda. But then Melinda Gates didn't come alone. She came with an entire group of people, like a political caste, if I can call them that. These were ideologues, and the more I studied them, the more outraged I became about it. That these people, they're not really talking about education in Africa. They are not talking about the infrastructure, raising infrastructure, real healthcare. They really care about the one thing, and that is population control and all the things that come with it. So they are going anti-family, anti-religion, anti-culture. It's just bringing to us an entirely formed set of ideologies. When the Africans already have their own thoughts and ideologies, we are not a vacuum, right? We're not a vacuum. Just like I had talked to you about the Kente, you can see that the Africans think so deeply about everything, even things that you think shouldn't matter, right? It's the way we eat, the way we do everything, it's so well thought out. So we are not. We're definitely not a cultural vacuum. We have our thoughts about reproduction. We have our thoughts about human sexuality. We have our thoughts about babies, about the sanctity of life, about the family, about what it means to have a baby, for every child born, for every addition to the family. But then these people are coming with their money, and then they are trying to show us that our children are nothing but statistics.
And Uju, those people that are going, the people that are going there are not happy people, and they're going to a country filled with happy people, telling them how to be happy. It just doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous. I judge countries and communities by how they respond to the question when they ask me, how many children do you have? And when I say 7 children, wherever I've been in Africa, Kenya, Sudan, people light up, and they're so happy. When I'm in Europe, they looks like they're around a cult member, like afraid. They're literally. Do you know what I say to people in Hollywood when they ask me? Because I'm in the movie business, and they'll say, "Well, how many you have kids?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have kids. How many? 7." They look shocked, and I have this joke. I say, "I'm like, no, don't worry. It's with 7 women. I'm not a religious fanatic."
Then they're more comfortable.
No, I'm telling you. You see, like, the fear leave them. Oh, I thought you were Mormon or something. No, I'm not kidding you. So I judge a community by how they respond to the question, how many kids do you have? And the proper response to that is a big, beautiful smile. I don't understand how people fear children. Now, 100 years ago, I think next year, is the anniversary of the Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy by this guy Stoddard. You know about this book, right?
No.
It's a book that was written by the founder of Internet, one of the co-founders of Planned Parenthood. And it was 100 years ago. Hitler liked this book. The Nazis would bring him to Germany, Margaret Sanger's good friend. And it very explicitly lays out a strategy to reduce the population in Africa. Now, if you read this book, now it's 100 years later, the policies that he advocates are no different than the Gates Foundation. Yeah. But is it that now the Gates Foundation believes that this is good for Africa? I believe that most of the people who work for them and are the instruments of these policies really think they're doing good. I don't think they believe they're colonialists or imperialists. But do you think, I don't know what you think about that, but do you think the people directing these foundations and these money, is it racism, classism, or do they genuinely believe this is good for the people of Africa?
I think it's a confluence of issues and a confluence of intentions. As you said, yes, a lot of people working underneath, a lot of people working further down the pyramid. They are well-meaning people. They're people who think that what they're doing is amazing. It's, they're on the moral high ground, and how is it not good to improve the lives of others? But the people who sit at the top of the pyramid, I have absolutely no sympathy for them whatsoever. I believe that these are people who are powerful enough to have any information that they want. They have access to every class of demographer. They have access to every kind of healthcare advisor and all of that. And these people know what their contraceptives will do to us and what their abortion agenda will do to us, and what it is that these organizations that they fund, what they really do and what they mean. But I believe that they are the children, the very wicked children of the eugenics movement that kind of went away but didn't quite die, right? So it's just the eugenics movement. You were talking about this book that's 100 years old now. The eugenics movement that was thriving 100 years ago. Margaret Sanger, Marie Stopes, these were people who were part of this movement. Organizations like Planned Parenthood and Marie Stopes International were formed at the time. These organizations now no longer bear that tag or that branding of eugenics, but then they say they're women's health, their reproductive health. It's the same thing, the same organizations that have lasted all these years. People like the Gates Foundation, I think if you want to understand the Gates, and I hate to, sometimes it just annoys me when I see people carrying around conspiracy theories, but this is not a conspiracy theory, what I'm about to say. But if you want to understand Bill Gates and his wife and their work within global health, I think you need to understand someone like Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller. If you understand exactly what they managed to do about 100 years ago when they came in and they got involved in everything, education, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, that's exactly where Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are now, and they're right at the center of it. They have their hands in Africa. They're very well respected among African governments because somehow their money has opened for them the doors of the presidents, almost every president on the African continent. They have their offices in many of the African capitals. Their money has also gotten them access to the people. Anywhere they go, they can have access to the actual people. They can go into any African country and they can touch and change policy. But then if you turn around, when the one that the Africans don't see, when they turn around and take their private jets back to the West, do you know who they are in touch with? They are in touch with all the pharmaceutical companies who are going to be making the contraceptives that the market is getting ready for. You see that if Africa opens up as a place where contraceptives, there's high demand for contraceptives, who would it benefit? Would it benefit the African government? No, it's actually going to benefit organizations like Pfizer, And Pfizer has worked, in fact, very closely with Melinda Gates since the thing she did in 2012. The interview she was doing. It eventually led to some very serious collaboration with Pfizer, and they made this kind of contraceptive that was $1 a piece. They called the Sienna Press that was made specifically for Africa. And so how many billions would come out of that, and how much will Pfizer gain out of that? And even on another level, myself as a scientist, I'm also very conscious that these people are surely getting a lot of medical data from Africa as parts of experiments and, results and consequences of what they're doing. And the data, you kind of put a price to it. They have an entire continent of human beings who don't have enough access to the information that they need in order to stand against these people. There is absolutely no oversight to the work they're doing. And it's terrible, because by the end of it, they will achieve a number of things. They will get to change our culture. They will get to change our thinking. They will get to change the way we feel about family. They will also get to make some great money out of it. And then, of course, on the other side as well, they would placate themselves and rub themselves on the back for their environmental friendly approach to things, because obviously the environmentalists are on one corner fighting for the reduction of the population of the Africans. So it's almost like they're placating everybody. So just to answer your question, Jason, it's like they want to achieve so many things with this one thrust, right? So it has an environmentalist touch to it. It has, yes, a racist touch to it as well, because if you look at how it is that they're moving, I believe that this is a kind of philanthropic racism. It has some money interest, and it has some future benefits as well when you start talking about data mining from the African people and exploitation. And they're having incredible power and influence in these African countries where nobody has elected them or chosen them. They just walk in and they still have access to all our policies.
I mean, Cecil Rhodes would have dreamed to be as influential in Africa as Bill Gates. Is that fair to say that he has more influence over the continent of Africa than the...
At this point, I would say that that Bill Gates actually is one of the most influential men in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa today.
And, at the end of the day, I think they just want to homogenize the world. They want a world homogenized state, and they want us all to be Unitarians from living in with the values of people living in the suburbs of Massachusetts, of Boston.
Yes.
And
that's exactly what they're hoping to come out of it, or what will eventually come out of it if we don't wake up and fight them.
Is Africa waking up to the how pernicious the Gates Foundation is?
Not quickly enough, because we don't have access to the people the way they do. So the Gates comes into a country. The first thing they do is a huge, very sleek campaign. I mean, they put so much money into these campaigns. Colorful HD adverts, things, they put up billboards, they are everywhere, and they look so beautiful. We don't have that, and we don't have the access. If we were in the West, I would say everyone has access to Facebook, everyone is on Twitter, like what is going on now, that people have access to more information than they ever have had any time in history. Through the social media, which of course now they're cracking down on, but that's another matter. But across Africa, it's unfortunate because the only people who have that kind of access are the younger Africans. And again, the younger Africans are so much more open to being manipulated, to being convinced. And, a lot of them are disillusioned, and they see that we are they are from a poor world and they are not satisfied. So they're kind of looking to the West, like everything coming from the West is good. But then the people, the villagers, the women who are in rural villages where they don't even have access to electricity, let alone something like internet. Not to talk of something like internet. So we cannot have access to them, and I don't have the kind of resource to get into those villages and get the information to them. But we are trying. Sometimes we try to work through the church.
The advantage is you have culture, you have tradition, you have grandmas and moms on your side, right? So
that's right.
That's the advantage.
That's why I can walk into any village and speak so freely about what I am, what I'm about, what my message is. And even by the time I say a few sentences, you see that they're really doing the talking for me, because these people are ever bit as pro-life as anybody is. You don't have to go and explain to them why abortion is wrong. It's once you explain to them what abortion is, they're screaming about it. I was actually I was in Uganda a few months ago, just before the lockdown, back in February. And I was speaking to this doctor who does a lot of amazing rural work in rural parts of Uganda. And she does excellent work on maternal health care and all of that. So she's helping women through pregnancy and all of that. So, but we were having dinner and talking, and she was explaining to me that when she goes into a village in some of these very rural parts of Uganda, and she hears the women, these rural women, speaking in their native language about abortion, you see, she says she's surprised because when they talk about abortion, they say if someone has aborted her child, they'll say she sacrificed, in the same words that you use and say somebody sacrificed to the gods. And right, like, Africa is so Christianized now that we know it's wrong to kill anybody or sacrifice anyone and offer to the gods, right? We know that is the most gross thing and it's horrible. We know that. But you see, the women in the villages are still talking about abortion like it's a human sacrifice. So it's not only just killing your child, it's like you've just sacrificed your child. You slit the throat of your child to appease the gods, right? So it's a complete no. It's not just a bad choice. It's not just a bad decision. To these women in the villages, it's an atrocity. It's something that comes with curses. So it shocked me. In fact, when she said it to me, I had chills all the way down my spine, because I know even in Nigeria, far away, in also rural villages in Nigeria, you also get this kind of sentiment from these quote unquote uneducated women, but they know if you have actually caused yourself to abort your child, or some kind of miscarriage, or you've done something and you've lost your child in pregnancy on purpose, then that's really equal to a human sacrifice. So these are strong sentiments.
Well, Uju, when I was in Darfur, I was really remote in Darfur about 10 years ago during the war. And I shared with a group of men that I was going to pray for peace for them. And I'd asked for them to pray to an end to abortion. And then in America, and I explained to them what abortion was. Yeah. And they looked very confused. There was a lot of talking among the men, and then they were talking to my interpreter, and I could tell it was very serious. And he said that they asked for you to not say make up lies about your country and your people, like America. And these were Muslims.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Don't lie about your country like that and say they would do such a horrible thing. Why would you make something like that up? And as I looked at them, I found out about abortion from a phone call when I was in basic training, when my high school girlfriend called me that her father forced her to have a third trimester abortion. And as I looked at these men and saw the confusion in their face at what I was trying to explain to them, I reflected on what it was like when I was a 17-year-old boy who had never been to church, knew nothing about politics, and didn't know abortion was really was a thing. I was confused, and I thought these men are in my shoes, the shoes that I was in as a 17-year-old boy, that what I'm saying to them is some strange joke, some disgusting lie or calumny on my own people.
It's gross.
That they couldn't even wrap their mind around.
Yeah.
And then now we're paying money to indoctrinate people across the world, across Africa, across the world. In this strange...
The younger ones are open to it. The younger ones, the highly educated. The more an African is educated, the more one has to be concerned. I mean, education, of course, is important and is necessary, and I want every African to have the education they need to come out of poverty. But, Jason, I think first and foremost, the kind of education Africans need is to understand our cultures and our customs, especially on things like human sexuality and, the sanctity of human life. We should learn that and be firmly grounded in that before we open up ourselves to whatever is coming from the West. be it the movie industry, because really Hollywood, people are able to watch films across the different African countries. People are listening to CNN in different places. In Nigeria, as we speak now, a lot of people are watching, CNN and other cable television networks from America. So if you don't understand your culture and you are not firmly rooted as an African in your culture, you could get swept away. And we're seeing that among the more elite, more educated Africans, younger ones. But you see these women in villages where there's no electricity, where they are not tainted, I would say, by some of the junk coming from the West, especially in entertainment and things like that.
It's junk.
Yeah, it is really.
We're poisoning the world. We're poisoning. We're poisoning the world. Hollywood is. So I've got.
Poisoning the well.
I've got 3 questions I have to ask you, and I know it's late there, so I want to make sure I get them in. One question is, I made a Kindle meme from your book, Target Africa. It's something that struck me, and I memed it this morning. And then women are asking me questions underneath the meme. This is from your book. I trained and worked for almost 5 years in a medical setting in Africa. Yet I never heard of the clinical term postpartum depression until I came to live in Europe. I never heard of it because I never experienced it or witnessed it, even with the relatively high birth rate around me. And then women were asking, and women were private messaging me who suffer from postpartum. A lot of friends of mine have suffered from postpartum. So they want to know why. And then my friends from Latin America said, hey, that's the same. We don't have that here. Is it that we are much more attuned to our women and more thoughtful and more sensitive to what they're experiencing than Africans? Or is it something real? And how can what would you tell Western women?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I would open my heart to any woman in any country whatsoever who has had postpartum depression or who is experiencing postpartum depression. And I would say to you, honestly, my heart goes to you. So we stand with every woman who has had a baby and then now she's suffering. But then this is one of the things that I would say when people say to me, what does Africa have to offer the world? We don't have the money. We don't have, we're not the ones inventing Google and internet and electricity and all of that. But I would say something, the African culture is so rich that if we really go within it thoughtfully, there are so many things within our culture, I believe, has helped us and continues to help us to remain resilient. So, coming here to the UK, I noticed that the one thing that happens when somebody has a baby is just you, your husband, and your baby. So a woman has a baby and then everybody will wave to you and say, goodbye, take care. You carry a 2-day-old baby back to the house. It's just between you and your husband, and then you having to deal with the sleep pattern, you're having to deal with all the emotional things and the hormones and all the things that have happened around the delivery. If your parents or relatives come, they come by and they visit and they go, right, Jason? Right? That's what happens. You may get some visitors shortly after you come back with your baby.
We don't have baby showers anymore.
Yeah, but even with a baby shower is like 3 hours event, right?
Yeah,
and
you're right.
Have it sometimes
but we don't even have. When I was a kid, there were baby showers all the time.
Yeah. So those who are having baby showers, that's great. It makes the woman feel that she's not alone. But mind you, a baby shower is only like a dinner party or a lunch party. It's a 3-hour event. But let me tell you what happens in my own culture. There is something as an Igbo person, we call in my tribe the omugwo. The omugwo means when a woman has a baby, never ever is she sent home to an empty house with just her husband, even if she has other children, even if she has, people who to help her in the house, her mother or the person who stands in for her mother. So that means if her mother is dead, then it has to be an auntie or a stepmom or someone must come and live with you for at least a full month. When the woman has the hormone things going, when the woman is having the most difficulty, when the woman has this tiny creature who just came into the world and you don't even know, you're so scared. It must be a mental pressure if you come in to a house with a brand new baby and this baby's life is in your hands. I tell you, even if you close your eyes to sleep, surely you cannot sleep with peace of mind, right? Because you keep thinking,
Yeah, what you're saying is, I think.
But your mother comes and stays with you.
What you're saying right there is profound, and it's really making me think, because part of me was thinking maybe we're just more attuned to it, right? But no, you're right. I mean, how crazy. Now, as you're saying it, the crazy things we become accustomed to, and the crazy thing that we become accustomed to, that women come home to an empty house. And many, maybe
and
most women,
and
many women, or most, maybe not, in some communities, are single mothers. They're not even coming home to a husband.
That's right. That's right. But we never do that. You must have somebody live with you, and it has to be like your mother or your big sister or your auntie. So you have this 4-week period, and some women even, because sometimes by the time your child is having a child, you are either retired or close to that. Sometimes women come for an removal for 2 or 3 months. I mean, the husband doesn't like it, but the son-in-law at a point gets tired. But it's really something that it gives women the peace of mind that you cannot begin to quantify, and no kind of psychiatric evaluation could ever quantify or explain it. But it just makes sense that somebody comes in, even in your small house, and stays with you and takes responsibility for this child with you. She is helping you, cooking for you, reminding you to go and lie down, go and rest. So this period
massaging you, telling you jokes, laughing with you, spending. As you're saying this, it's unbelievable. Yeah. I like how you put it. Africa has so much to give the world, like the cure to postpartum depression. But see, this is real solidarity, by the way. It's not easy. We want easy in the West. We want easy. Like, I want to take a knee, say Wakanda forever, wear something I don't even know what it is, then go about my life. That's how I show solidarity with the Black community. How I want to help my friends with postpartum depression, I want to buy them a book, and I want to go here, or say, hey, you should get this prescription or take this vitamin. What I don't want to do is move in their house for a month. That's how we Westerners are. So what you're saying is real solidarity. If you have a sister that has postpartum depression, you know what? You're not going to Aspen this year. You're going to take your vacation, and you're going to do the Africa cure, and you're going to go hang out with your sister, annoy your brother-in-law, and that's it.
That's it. You just imagine that you're sitting in front of the TV and your mom is carrying your baby, and you're all just chilling because you've just had a baby. You're not going back to work, at least that first month, right? So it's an incredible scene, and it happens in almost every household in Africa, no matter how rich, no matter how poor. It's you, your mom, your child, and yes, the husband is there somewhere, but then, men sleep through the night. Even if he didn't sleep through the night, you just need someone else that isn't your husband. And I believe that that's something great in our culture.
As you're telling this, there's a documentary I've been developing, and it's one of only 2 things my wife vetoed. I was going to do a reality show with CNN during the 2016 election. She vetoed that, and it was, and the other thing she vetoed was this, which I was already in development of, and then she'd overheard a call with one of my producing partners who said, you're probably going to die. She came in and threw a Bible at my head and yelled at me. And she said, you are not making this film. But as you were talking, I was thinking of this project, which I'm still going to develop. I'm still developing. She doesn't listen to the show, okay? So you're not going to tell her. I'm not going to tell her.
You're listening to this one, and then you get caught.
No. Hey, and for her friends, we're not telling her. So as you were telling the story, it helped me understand how one of the greatest tragedies in American history that no one knows about. During the Obama administration, there was a drone strike, and the people who were evaluating the drone surveillance footage were certain that it was an Al-Qaeda meeting in Yemen. And so they ordered a drone strike. I'm going to cry. Even every time I tell this story, I'm going to cry. Oh my gosh. And I tell it all the time. There was a drone strike, and they thought for sure it was a terror. It was an Al-Qaeda meeting. Well, what happened was they saw a couple of women a couple of people go into a house. Then they left, and they brought back a couple of more people. Then they all left, and they went and brought back more people.
Wow.
So what they saw was senior officers meeting with their commander, who went to get the equivalent of like NCOs, and then they went to get the rest of the troops, you know, in sort of the chain of command. And then they're like, let's get them all. Now, in you telling your story, do you know what that was that they were witnessing?
May have been a wedding or some kind of celebration, or
A child was born. The mom and the sisters came for the
goodness.
delivery. I'm going to cry
Yeah.
every time I tell the story. I'm going to cry. Then they left to get the cousins.
Yeah.
And then they came in and the cousins got, because everyone wanted time with the mom and the baby. Then
Of course.
then the cousins and then everyone left to get the other friends from the village.
Oh my goodness.
And in one strike, 36 women that were there to celebrate a baby. But those American analysts would have had no way of understanding. All they could think of is they would have had no way. If you were there in that room, you'd have said, wait, is this a house? Is there a woman in the house? Is it
exactly.
Is it a childbirth, maybe? You would have thought that, but they had no way culturally of understanding what they were looking at.
There's no way. That's right. Our cultures are so different, Jason. Our cultures, it's a different world out there. It is a different world. And believe me, a lot of these countries, you know, who have nothing but their culture, they really pay attention to their culture. You know, we're not out there making tons of money and all that. But as I said earlier, our culture and our customs mean so much. When a woman has a baby, there is this celebration that happens. You know, there's this thing we do, like, I don't know whether you know what is ululation, the ululation. So women ululate, they make this very ringing sound, high pitch.
Yeah.
Now that, you don't just hear them making that sound, you normally hear it. There's a type of ululation which is particularly for a birth. There is an ululation which is for a marriage. So you have to have, in my own language, we call it the orono. Women have to do the orono when a baby is born. It's like they do that, they chant very high pitch.
You said they dance in the book. Hey, I'm going to call you out. In the book, you said, and the women dance. Then you had to say they really dance. Now, now when I read that, I said, Uju's a racist. Uju is saying white people don't really dance.
Of course, white people dance. You do the waltz and all that, don't you? But seriously.
I caught you, Uju. You brought it up, by the way. I didn't bring it up. I caught you. I read your book. You see, I know your book. I have dyslexia, but I have a, what do you call that? A photographic memory. And in that, when you talked about that in your book, you said they dance. And then you had to add, they really dance.
They really dance.
Well,
yes, we do. It's not just nodding of the head. It's like this dance that comes from the core of the being, and they're dancing and they're really moving. It's incredible. And to think about it, I always just took it for granted growing up. It's just, you hear the ululation, you just know, who had a baby? That's just the question I asked my mom, who had a baby? And my mom would say, this person's sister had a baby, or this person's wife had a baby, or, you know. So the other day, only a few weeks ago, during this corona pandemic, my cousin had a baby. See, the thing is, my cousin is actually in Texas, in the United States. My mother, at this moment, is stuck in the United Kingdom, somewhere in London with my sister, right? And then my cousin's stepmom is all the way in Nigeria. So everyone is in a different place. You know what my mom did on the day this baby came? In Texas, baby born in Houston. Once my mother heard it, my mother said to me, tell me once she's had her baby. Tell me, because I was on WhatsApp with her when she was in labor. So I texted my mom. No, I called my mom and I said, she's had a baby. The baby is here. Immediately, my mom drops the phone. She calls my auntie in Nigeria, and they begin to do the ululation over the phone. That's how important it is. So they have to celebrate this baby born, this member of a family who was born in Houston. That this child is almost like a queen, a princess who has been born. It's a baby girl that she had. My mom had to do the ululation over the phone with my auntie, who is my cousin's stepmom. Because no child should come into this world uncelebrated.
Do you know, Uju? Thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you for that. You know, first, this was every culture in the world until, say, the early 20th century.
That's true.
And so this was robbed from us, and now we are stealing from you what was stole from us. It's like a cancer, and we need this back. Every one of my children. All seven of them. I had the first at 18. Well, I actually have 8, the one I lost to abortion, and then my other children. I greeted all of them with joy. By the grace of God, you know, when I found out I was pregnant at 17 years old, I was happy. I don't know. I never went to church a day in my life. I knew nothing. I just couldn't believe. I remember thinking, how lucky of me at 17 years old that I'm already a father. And when I tell this to people, they don't believe me. You know, they think that I'm making it up when I became a father at 18 and 19. But do you know, with each of my children, all 8 of them, the news of their arrival was greeted by some members of my family with, wait, what? Wait, you're too young. Oh, you just had one. Oh, you've only been married.
Already?
You've only been married for 6 weeks and she's already pregnant. You just had a baby. Well, don't you think you're too old? I've been told I'm too young. I'm not married. I just got married. I'm too old. Like it's never one of my kids was perfect. And you know, I remember it becoming when I had my son and people were like, aren't you scared? I'm like, I have a winning lottery ticket. What are you people? This child is the most precious thing in the what? And because of whatever learning disability I have, that I have not been indoctrinated, I thank God to see children the way that you see children, the way that Africa sees, the world sees children.
It's so unusual.
Except for us.
You are really the exception to the rule, Jason, because what has happened is that the likes of the Gates and, you know, Carnegie and Rockefeller, all these people who have social engineered their way into mainstream world in the West, they've gone into schools and they've completely taken that away. That's this thing that you've held on to, this joy and this realization that every child born should be celebrated, that no child born should be uncelebrated. See, this thing my 77-year-old mother felt, that this is so important that we have to celebrate this child as it is, even with the coronavirus, even though we're all like worlds apart. But that's what we have within our culture, and it's very strong. And it has many implications, all the way to even our own health as women, right? And as people, it rolls and ripples right into our own lives and into our own psyche, and that's why we are the way we are now, and we don't have the prevalence of something like postpartum depression and all of that. Even though, yes, we have problems, you know, there's poverty, there's difficulty, but when we come together as communities, we are very resilient, and there are so many safeguards within the cultural setup within our lives as Africans that we have remained resilient against all odds.
And this is the blessing of America. Like, what saves us, I think, is that immigrants bring treasure here. And, you know, I pray that all the immigrants that are coming, you know, they come here from Mexico, they come here from Africa, and they bring that love of family. And that's something we need to cherish and something we need to rediscover. And, you know, it's not just this idea that every child, I think most children alive today in the United States were greeted with fear. Most people living today, when the news of their arrival was shared with the family and friends, most of us,
somebody would have said something.
Guaranteed. My mother had me at 16, so we know that wasn't an exciting day. Yeah. But I think that's true. That's true for most of us. Okay, so
somebody would have said something negative.
Now,
about the child born.
Two last questions. One is, you brought up COVID. When I don't know if you've had a chance to read any of my articles on the coming famine to Africa, but I've been writing about this since the Italy shutdown, and I saw that food insecurity was going to become a real problem in Africa. David Beasley from the World Food Program said that over 150 million people from Bangladesh across the Middle East and into Africa may starve to death or more. Kip Tom, the U.S. ambassador for food, has been to the United Nations, has been spearheading, trying to wake the world up to the Corona shutdown hangover, which is going to be more deadly than this drunken fit that we're in right now. Are you hearing any words from friends back home on food insecurity in Nigeria or in other parts of Africa? Because this is something that I have been really concerned about.
Yeah, so we actually, a couple of weeks ago, because what has happened in African countries is that the coronavirus has been late in getting to the country. So we are almost exactly where the United States and Italy were in March, sometime in the middle of March. So it's almost like a second wave, right? So because it came to us. Nobody in Africa had coronavirus originally. It flew into African capitals and airports. So right now, a couple of weeks back, people started complaining very strongly in my own region, the southeastern part of Nigeria, that there have been some very serious and very strongly felt difficulties and problems with food supply. So there has been a rupture of food supplies because when the lockdown happened in Nigeria, particularly, every state shut down their borders. So we do have a state system, and every state can be autonomous almost in the same way that you have in the United States. So all the states immediately shut down, but then our food comes from one part of the country or another, and then even some of it is imported. And then, so the people in the southern part of the country don't produce some of the main staple food that we eat. Some of the food comes from the north, the Muslim northern region. But all of that has been ruptured within this period of lockdown. We've now had more than a month and a half lockdown in Nigeria. And people are genuinely going hungry. People are genuinely starving in places where they shouldn't be starving. And this is the wrong time of the year to harvest crops, so it's difficult. So in my own...
So, Uju, I want to stop you there because I don't believe... I've been writing about this, and I get challenged by a lot of folks that the numbers I'm citing aren't accurate. And you said... And I know now, people have been sending me videos of actually mothers not able to wake up their children because of malnutrition. They died over the night. It's heartbreaking, but people don't want to admit it. And I think the reason they don't want to admit it is they trust our media, and they believe that if this were true, the media is telling us not one death is too much from COVID. One death is too much. But yet the story,
people are dying of hunger.
But when it comes to hunger, they bury it. It'll be in the New York Times, the Washington Post. They report on it. But how does epic famine, why is that on page B17 if they really care about African lives? I mean, it really leads, you don't want to believe in conspiracies, but it makes you think there is a legitimate conspiracy to greatly reduce the population of Africa, and they do not want to wake people up because they do report it on B17, just like they reported the Holocaust. Once a year, the New York Times did a story on the Holocaust. In the midst of it, so that they can look back and go, no, we had a story a year. Oh, we had a story on famine in Africa caused by and they don't say it's caused by the shutdown. They call it the COVID. Well, COVID may lead to famine, not COVID. It's the government response to COVID.
Yeah, it was the response, and the response. You know what? Actually, Jason, to top this off, the response was recommended by the World Health Organization. So the Nigerian government didn't just begin to shut down their borders. These were some of the recommendations that came directly from the United Nations. As you know, African countries hold the UN in high regard. So we have now responded to this to such a degree that people are having so much problems with hunger and nutrition, something that we haven't seen in so many years, and this is affecting people of across the socioeconomic classes. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how poor you are. In certain places, you can get certain kinds of food, and sometimes this is like the staple food. So recently, because of how high the food prices have then been hiked, the little food there is, in my own family, we had to raise money amongst ourselves to send food to get money for people within our own local community. So we come from a little village. So our own kinsmen, so like 50 to 70 families. My mom was calling us all up, telling me to send how many pounds, send this amount of money into my bank account so that I can send it back to Nigeria because people are hungry. And this is all related to the response to the coronavirus pandemic, which has now led the Africans almost to starve themselves, to starve people in particular.
Well, they're not starving themselves. This is the neo-colonialism.
Yeah,
it's the WTO. The WTO, which is a China sock puppet, pulled the strings. It's a Gates found. It's a neoliberal China alliance sock puppet. They dictated policies, which, by the way, got me arrested. I was arrested. No charges were pressed for protesting during the coronavirus. By the way, I was at the Reopen Hawaii protest because of my concern for food security in America, especially Hawaii, because we're vulnerable. But the real reason that I went there was because I am panicked at the thought of 100 to 350 million people this year who will starve to death, not because of Mother Nature, solar cooling, global warming, or locusts, but because of a policy that the people in Nairobi, the people in Nigeria, the people in Sudan, they didn't choose these people. In Somalia and Ethiopia, these people, nobody there concocted this ridiculous response to COVID. And
no.
So
they're all listening to the international community, and they're doing what they've been asked to do.
Because there's carrots and sticks. They're scared.
Yes.
These leaders are scared.
Yes.
So that leads me to my last question. In the United States, there is a divide. Are you a citizen of the UK?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have dual citizenship. I didn't give up my Nigerian citizenship.
So you're an African immigrant to the UK. In the United States, there is tension between the black community in America and immigrants, and there'll be a lot of, well, they don't understand our experience. And so when you saw that, what is it that you would, as an African, that you would want to say to Americans who are black about all of that? Like that there's this difference in experience that immigrants feel compared to the experience of people born here. Because I know some of my black friends are going to listen to this and they're going to go, well, she doesn't know our experience. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, that's why I'll tread very lightly and very carefully. Because I've several times I've had these arguments or kind of tension with my Black American friends, and it's like, yeah, you're African and you don't understand. So first of all, acknowledge that we are completely different from completely different backgrounds, and just knowing what I know, the bit I know about American history. We studied slavery. Of course, we know what happened during the Jim Crow years and the segregation and all of that. So I acknowledge all of that, and it does hurt, right? It does hurt to see and take in what happened in the past and the atrocities that happened because of racism. But then let me then talk as an African woman, as an African who was born and raised in a part of Africa that was, rural part of Africa. So I was fortunate enough to absorb a lot of things from my own community, such that it cannot be flushed out even after many years in the UK. That I was raised in a community where there were only just Black people. Okay, we saw a few white people, but I think we didn't even really take it into account. All the white people we saw were on TV. But then everybody, when you look to your left, when you look to your right, everybody kind of looks like you, right? But then you would think, okay, there's no discrimination in this society, right? False. So we have very strong problems of tribalism, which is not being acknowledged by the international community. And this was what happened in Rwanda that led to the genocide. A lot of African countries actually have very strong elements of discrimination within communities. Just the other day, it hasn't been very long, I think it was just a couple of months ago, people in South Africa were killing Nigerians. So xenophobia, this is Black on Black violence or Black on Black discrimination to the point of violence. It happens in Nigeria between my own tribe, between the Igbos and the Hausas, for example. Sometimes it happens in different African countries, and yet the West turns their back because everybody has the melanin, equal amount of melanin. So nobody cares who's dying, nobody cares who's being discriminated against. But then, from my own point of view as a human being, having my own experience, it really it does also annoy me a little bit when people tell me, you don't understand racism. You've never really felt that. No, I may not have seen racism as you've seen it in America or how you feel it or perceive it, But then as a Nigerian person, as a Nigerian woman, as an Igbo woman within Nigeria, that's my tribe, the Igbo tribe, I know what discrimination is like. And there has been a genocide against my people only back in the 60s and 70s. So it hasn't even been that long. There is still a lot of discrimination. There is still, and in Nigeria, when I say my name, then somebody would know what tribe I am. You know, I could be denied a job just because of my name, because somebody can identify me as an Igbo person. So if you're feeling that you're having that kind of discrimination in America, I understand exactly how you feel. But then what do we do about it? Is the fact that you have to try and rise up from the point of victimhood or the point of victimization. You know, I'm an Igbo person, and I know my tribe is, even though we are a major tribe, but they still kind of put us down in some parts of government and institutions. But then I have reason above that, and it never really informs my my relationship or my friendship or the way I see other tribes in Nigeria. You must rise above that, because if you allow that sentiment to keep boiling to the point where before somebody has even done anything to you, or before you've dealt with anyone, you would have in your mind, you would say, I'm sure this person hates me because I'm Igbo, or I'm sure this person hates me because I'm black, or I'm sure this person. So you will rise above that, because if you don't, that poison could completely destroy your life. So I myself have lived in the UK for 14 years. I came here in 2006. I came, and the first place I was sent to is this small county. Well, in Northern Ireland, it's called Enniskillen. A lot of people I know, I've hardly ever met anyone who knows Enniskillen, except if you're from that region. I lived in Enniskillen for a couple of months, and I worked there in the hospital. I tell you, there were 3 Black people at the time in 2006 when I lived in Enniskillen. And coming from Nigeria, I was a bit afraid, because I was like, what if they don't like me? What if, everyone thinks because I'm Black? But it was actually good that was my first experience of Europe, that I went to a place where nobody looked like me, or, hardly anybody looked like me, because it allowed me to kind of absorb the goodness of the people around me. And I saw that, oh my goodness, majority of the people actually are looking for ways to help, and are looking for how to make me feel more at home and more comfortable. Actually, Enniskillen was where they had the Oma bombing. Is just next to Oma, where a lot of bombing. So people were concerned for me at the time, asking me, so your parents allowed you to come to this place because there was these bomb attacks, all the bombings that happened in the Northern Ireland region. So everyone's nice, everyone's kind, and I just got over it very quickly. To tell myself that I am never a victim. And if you then meet somebody by chance in this life who treats you badly for who you are, for how you look, or your tribe, or your race, just know that it's a really stupid person. Just walk over that person, because I tell you, for every one racist there are 10,000 good, kind people of the same race. So why are you going to tarnish everything for this one fool who treats you badly? And this is exactly how I have dealt with things, where I feel somebody has slighted me, or, it might maybe by chance be related to race. And it has worked for me. Again, I would say I don't know how the African Americans feel, and they might feel that I don't understand. But I tell you, I understand, because I turn around and I look at where I come from, and even the fact that nobody makes a sound about it in the international media. But racism is something that I believe at this time we are ripe for walking over it and just walking out of it completely. And it's not the way the media is presenting it. That's not going to, none of their solutions will work. None of it.
Well, Uja, and I appreciate you, because you've had the courage, I think, in the United States. I believe that there is systematic racism, but in a way we're never allowed to address. I think the systematic racism can be seen in the media telling us it's never appropriate to talk about black on black crime. It's never appropriate to talk about the high rate of violence in certain neighborhoods, like in Chicago.
Yeah.
we're not allowed to talk about it. To me, that is showing a lack of regard for Black life, young Black life. There's a school in Illinois, in Chicago, called Harper High School. You're more likely to be shot as a student in that school than a Marine in Iraq during the height of the war. So, but you're not allowed to bring attention to that. I think that is a system of racism, or Planned Parenthood's being, we are not allowed to bring up the racist roots of the abortion industry. We're told, even in the pro-life movement, we tell each other, you shouldn't bring that up. Don't bring that up. Lila Rose, people, she tweeted about it after George Floyd, and people said, you shouldn't bring that up. And maybe she shouldn't have, but I want to know, why can't we bring up racism, or even if it's not like the people implementing these instruments are racist. A woman who was Black who worked for a Planned Parenthood said, I knew Margaret Sanger's history, but I thought if I worked there, I can use it to help Black women. She was Black. She said, I thought I could use it to help Black women. But then I realized I was watering an apple tree hoping I could get peaches. And an apple tree only gives apples. And she says it doesn't matter the intent of the person watering the tree. But I want to do, you're going to be a first of series of shows I do in the coming weeks where I want to say things that are not allowed to be said, because to truly be in solidarity with the vulnerable is to become vulnerable. To virtue signal with every major multinational corporation in the world that is just trying to build brand loyalty, whether it's the Democrat Party or Nike. At the end of the day, all of their virtue signaling is based on getting you to be loyal to their brand.
They don't care. Yeah,
they're not thoughtful to the vulnerable. Because if they were, Congress would be taking a knee for hunger. In Africa, the biggest famine since World War II.
Yeah, this attitude has actually led to genocide. And there are parts of Africa actually today that are close to genocide. I mean, there are regions within certain African countries. If you go to Cameroon, the Anglophone part of Cameroon, last week, they're killing people. They are killing people. If you go to parts of Nigeria, some Christian villages are being completely deleted by Muslim extremists around those regions, but nobody is talking about it. So genocides are actually occurring, Black on Black genocides. And meanwhile, all companies want is to rally around this version of racism which is being thrown around in the West.
Well, Uju, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Rene Girard, again, he says that when you stand in solidarity with the vulnerable, you become as vulnerable as they are. You become indistinguishable to the mob from the person you're standing with. But I learned a secret: when you stand with the vulnerable, you're standing with the most beautiful people in the world, the most noble, the most thoughtful, the most courageous, the most kind, the most just. So never, ever, ever be afraid to stand with the vulnerable. And you might be alone for a minute, but then someone else is going to walk over by you, and someone else, and someone else. And it's going to be the most unique, beautiful group of folks you've ever met in your life. And my work in the pro-life movement for many, many years, I started in 89. I'd say the first 9 or 10 years were kind of very lonely years. I was an atheist in Hawaii fighting abortion, and it felt hopeless. But over, 1 year turns into 5, turns into 10. Now it's 31 years that I've been doing this work.
Jason.
And and when I look to my left and I look to my right, all of my heroes are my friends. And you are one of my heroes, that you didn't ask for a fight. You responded to something you saw, didn't know that people would even pay attention. And then I'm sure you got scared. You got kicked in the face. You might have regretted for a time saying what you said, thought it was imprudent or could have been said better. And that's not the truth. You said it perfect. And with whatever fear, maybe you're fearless and maybe you never had fear, but whatever cost that you have to
Of course, I have my fears.
To your career as a medical, as a scientist, a medical professional, I'm sure it gives you trepidation to do what you do.
Absolutely, yeah.
But
absolutely,
you're a treasure and someone I'm so proud to call a friend and so grateful to have as my friend. And thank you for standing with the vulnerable and when they're truly vulnerable.
Thank you. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for being on your show. I'm so grateful for the conversation we've had. We've talked now for a long time, but we don't even feel it. And this is how we chat in real life, Jason. That's what people don't know. That you and I can chat for hours, and we've done it several times in different places. But this time around, you're recording it and you're putting it as a podcast. That's amazing.
Yeah, and the one thing I want you to solve once and for all, your cousin thinks you like her more than you like me. I told her you like me more. So you should just solve it once and for all and let her know. Eden. I told her
She's not my cousin in real life, but mentally we are cousins, because in the pro-life movement in the UK, it's like an inside joke. There's not many black people, and even Eden is like half black, right? And then somebody says that we're just cousins. So that's how the whole cousin title came, because it's like so few of us. Oh my gosh, I do like Eden, and I do like you, Jason. Don't worry. When it's not being recorded, I would tell each of you who I like more.
I understand. You're a politician. Speaking of the UK, I got to speak for Spuck this week in Scotland.
Wonderful.
And yeah, I did it, of course, via Skype or Zoom or something. But it was a privilege to be able, I've been to England only to the airport. You'll appreciate this. I've been to the airport a few times, but one time I had been coming back from Sudan and I left everything in Darfur, everything I had. And so all I traded for was like these sweatpants that were way too short, these sandals that I bought in Darfur, and a ratty t-shirt. And so I am in the UK, I'm in the airport in London wearing a t-shirt, sweatpants, and slippers that, I bought in Sudan. And the security came and made me go buy clothes. So I went and bought an Arsenal jumpsuit. I've never even watched soccer before.
No.
But I own a complete Arsenal jumpsuit.
I tell you that when you wear that, be careful in parts of London, because it depends on where you are. You will either make like really close instant friends, or you make enemies.
Can I tell you where I've made friends?
It's serious business here. Yeah.
I'm going to be really politically incorrect. So I would wear it around LA because I'm a goof, right?
Yeah.
So I don't buy clothes. You either give me something. I have suits I wear for work. Then it's T-shirts and surf shorts, or what people give me.
Yeah.
So I would wear it around LA. And I'm going to be politically incorrect. I'm just going to tell you the truth. Jewish guys in Hollywood would come up to me. And they would go, "You're an Arsenal fan?" And I'd say, "Nah, I just like the outfit. I was in the airport." And then then I found out that it's somehow Jewish people love Arsenal. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Or maybe my Jewish friends are pulling my leg, but
it could be. It could be that, there could be something about Arsenal, but it's serious business here. I live in the Midlands, so we are West Brom. And then London, you have Arsenal, you have West Ham, and you have Chelsea. Then in Manchester, you have Man U and Man City. So mind where you wear that outfit, I tell you.
I'll be very, very careful. I'll dress like an American. I'll wear my Chicago White Sox hat and a Homer Simpson T-shirt.
That's it.
So they know where I'm from. So, Uju, how do people find you? I'm going to put the link to everyone listening. You have to buy Target Africa. You must buy Target Africa. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. And what's the best way for people to follow your very, very important work?
It's on Twitter. So you just find me at Obianuju, at Obianuju, at Obianuju. You find me on Twitter, and I'm there speaking out as long as Twitter will allow me to speak the truth and speak up for the sanctity of human life at every stage and phase of development. Sometimes they don't allow me, so they keep stifling me and hiding my tweets and removing retweets and removing followers. So be careful, but you will find me there if you look.
Really a medical professional. Unbelievable. I'm going to put that in the show notes too, and then when this show comes out, which will be like soon, like in a couple minutes, when this show comes out, I will tag you, Uju, on Twitter. So go to Jason Jones, at Jason Jones Show on Twitter, and follow Uju. And I never promote my Twitter. I'm not a big Twitter fan because it brings out the worst of me, but I'm going to at Jason Jones Show, share it, and you can find Uju there, or go in the show notes. Uju, it's late there, and I know you have to go to sleep and go to work.
Yeah.
I'm going to wrap the show up. You can stick around after I wrap it up, or you can just jump off now.
I'll wait.
Okay.
I'll wait, Jason.
All right. All right, guys. See, this is the reason why I do this show, because my friends are treasure, and I want to share my friends with you. And I'm so grateful for Uju for coming on. Make sure you get the book. Make sure you follow her on Twitter. And make sure that when you are doing something, you are not virtue signaling, but you are thoughtfully, courageously, like Uju, standing with the vulnerable when they're vulnerable. If there is a chorus of voices in defense of the vulnerable, they're not vulnerable, and don't add your voice to the chorus, because it's probably shameless victimism. And this show is about radical solidarity. It's about being vulnerable. So, on that note, this episode has been brought to you by the Vulnerable People Project, standing in solidarity with the most vulnerable people in the world at the most vulnerable moment of their life. Go to thegreatcampaign.org for a donation of $20 or more. You get a free copy of my book, The Race to Save Our Century, that I wrote with John Zmirak. Also brought to you by Movie to Movement, creating a culture of life, love, and beauty through the power of film. Our new film, Divided Hearts of America, Uju's in that movie, will be in theaters this year. Go to movietomovement.com and check out what we're doing. Until next time, from the west side of Oahu and the UK, it's the Jason Jones Show. Aloha.
This has been the Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media.